Yeah, 6:32. Let's begin. Welcome back, friends. I'm sure, as teacher or parent, you all provide ultimate support to children every day. You go above and beyond to make their learning experience as amazing as possible. In this very process, today we are here to discuss what is that we as teachers or parents can do to help highly sensitive children in our classrooms or probably at home. Let us welcome Rebecca. She's experienced proofreader, editor, and writer, also a life coach. She has 6 years of freelance experience, proofreading, editing, and writing for a range of commercial, academic, organizational, and individual clients. Also a great human being. She's one of the amazing people that always supported and encouraged me for what I'm doing today. We welcome you to Ab Initio, Rebecca. We are really happy to have you here.
Thanks, Pooja. It's really an honor to come. And
yes.
I guess the main experience that applies to today is being a parent and being in contact with teachers a lot, who I quite admire. Yeah.
Thank you. And now you are the host. I think you can share the screen.
Yes. Let me just do that. Bear with me, guys, because tech is not my strength, but I know enough, I think, to be able to do this. Actually, it turns out I don't. I thought you did it via the video. Is that right? Got any tips, Pooja? Is there a quick way to just press share? Right. Okay, here we are. So this I will change as we go so we can see more. But I wasn't sure, Pooja, if you wanted to ask questions and have them answered, or whether you'd like me just to speak and see if we want interruptions. I don't mind. What do you prefer?
Yes, I think we are good to go. We have, we are able to see the screen.
Okay, good. So, well, I'll just start then. And if you've got questions, please feel free to interrupt. I'm really okay with that. And actually, the more interactive it is, sometimes the better it turns out to be. So, feel free to do it orally, because I might not notice if it's all written. If you'd like a question towards the end, maybe Pooja can manage those in the chat.
Sure.
So I got interested in this topic about 4 years ago when my child turned 5. And we were noticing some things that were happening at home that weren't happening at school. She would be quite emotional, good and bad. And the kind of thing maybe you guys as teachers see in the classroom that might look like a behavioural difficulty or some sort of neurological challenge. It's something that just makes the child a little bit different. But when we went to her teachers to explain it, that's not what they saw at school. And it took us a very long time to realise that she was behaving in this way, probably because she felt safer at home, and also she knew that at school there's some certain amount of stuff expected of her. She knew that socially it wouldn't be okay to just let go. And that's something I presume we all want for children, because part of going to school is learning how to operate in society. But actually, she was really struggling, and the penny dropped when I read a lovely book by a lady called Dr. Elaine Aron. She's been writing on the subject for years. She's I think, a psychologist, but she's definitely a scientist interested in neurodiversity. And she is highly sensitive herself. She did a heck of a lot of research and notes everybody else's research on this. And she has put together a beautiful book called The Highly Sensitive Child. It's now quite old, it's about 20 years old, but there's updated editions. When I read it, it starts with a very simple tick list at the front, which I'm usually quite wary of because I think maybe people shouldn't be in boxes. However, when you start ticking them and you realize everyone is just like, well, of course, without even having to think about it, I was like, okay, maybe this makes sense, you know? Things like, have they always jumped at loud noises, or are they startled easily? Do they find every fabric quite difficult, or unusual fabrics, things that you'd think were comfortable, like soft cotton, uncomfortable? Do they notice things about their environment before you do, like a strong, you know, not even a strong smell, just a smell that they think is strong and upsets them? And when you read all this, I guess what came to mind with me was like, oh, is she autistic? Because that's how we hear about sensory overstimulation a lot. And that's definitely true. I mean, I know autistic children too, and it's hard for them in that way, but I don't know much about autism. So I was like, shall we take her to the doctor? Shall we take her to a psychologist? But we went to a play specialist, play therapist. She was lovely, and she kind of spotted things about her that we were already thinking as well, independently of what we thought. So a picture started emerging that she was able to just pick up on stimuli that other people didn't even notice. And although that can be a real advantage, which we'll go on to later, it can also be a proper challenge, because sometimes I wonder, should sensitivity be changed to receptivity? Because what we as highly sensitive people find very hard and would have to, I don't know that we can even learn it, is to switch off the incoming button. Like, we can't just not receive stuff. And while I'm speaking, by the way, don't think for a second that I don't think other people do this too. It's not like we're like this special species that kind of, it's more that some things are a bit more for highly sensitive children than others, good and bad. So if you want to, it's up to you. You can put in chat at the moment why, you know, you find high sensitivity interesting. Is there a person in your life that you're thinking about, a child in particular, someone in your class, or just a pattern that you've seen over the years with your students? Any observations at all that we can talk about later would be so interesting. But that is my background, and I have found out about it via my daughter and also reading about things for myself. I have a sneaking suspicion that it does run in families a little bit, but that's just a suspicion. There's no kind of scientific proof of that, I don't think. But the main thing to remember about high sensitivity is that it is a neurological difference. So it's kind of like autism in that way. It's a diversity that you're born with. You can't change it, apparently, but you can manage it. And it's one of the easier ones to manage. So children who are highly sensitive, you as a teacher or parent, your role is so crucial, because you can help them manage their trait whilst also letting them know that you totally understand them and accept them for who they are. And that's so empowering when you're young. I mean, I luckily had it without my teacher knowing, because one of my parents was absolutely the opposite of what you'd want as a highly sensitive person. But my daughter also, we changed schools for her because there was a better environment for her. We went from a normal school to a Montessori one, and we've been very, very happy ever since. There's still problems, but that Montessori environment is fantastic for highly sensitive children. Any environment where they can be themselves and not be judged, and know that other children are having the same approach from their teacher. So it's a difference that we are born with. It's innate, and actually there's quite a lot of people who have it. So there might be even, I would imagine, quite a few teachers probably are highly sensitive as well, because the kind of personality characteristics it gives you make you an excellent teacher, which we can talk about in a minute. But it's in 15 to 20% of humanity, they think. And one of the most interesting things is that we're not alone in that. It's in all animal species. So Elaine Aron says that there must be an evolutionary reason for it, why some people would be more cautious, maybe hold back a bit before they act, why some people would question things more, why some people would, instead of noticing people's achievements, notice how they interact with one another more, things like that. And it's easy to assume as well that the highly sensitive child would be quiet, introverted, less, more of an introvert. And it's true, apparently, that there are more highly sensitive introverts, but it's also present in extroverts. So it's not that you're always going to be quiet necessarily. But highly sensitive extroverts are fascinating to look at because they behave differently to non-highly sensitive extroverts. And it's lovely that it's present in both. And the key part of it is just this heightened awareness, but more like, we're very receptive and we don't always want to be. But when we do, it can be a really fun thing to look into and play with, and other children find it interesting too. So I think on the whole, it could be a very good thing to have in your classroom. And there's this concept of priestly advisor, which I kind of just hinted at. So one way to spot a highly sensitive child is when you think there's a child in your class who might be a bit shy, maybe holding back, maybe never answers anything, but when you actually see what they're producing in their work or even their scores, they're achieving fine. You think, why don't they say more in class, and maybe they're shy, but maybe they're also just quite confident in their body language and they're sitting and they're listening. Or maybe they have just a very small group of friends that they're very loyal to. They find it a bit harder to mix with others, but when they do, they're actually sitting and listening a lot. That's kind of like the idea of having somebody in society who can be next to the leader and saying, maybe not wanting to be the leader themselves, although they can be, and saying, that's a great idea, but, or what if, or just kind of moderating it a bit. I suppose it would have been a chancellor next to a king or queen later on, earlier on in history, or whatever that means in your culture. Or even actually a really good wife next to a really, really strong male leader, kind of in history, I mean, because actually often there are so many things in literature where you see that strong character being the person behind the leader. Sometimes it's a bad thing because they're Machiavellian, but often it's somebody who's wise in that position. So maybe it doesn't make sense right now, but that's a really good way to spot a highly sensitive child if it's not otherwise obvious. The hanging back is not always to do with being shy. So I did this a while back to sort of explain to everybody what it feels like to be the parent of a highly sensitive child. And these are some things that we often hear, and it's not just from teachers, it's from everybody actually, parents of your child's friends, nursery school teachers, just people out and about, even when you're playing in the play park, and friendly people who kind of just go, they notice things about children and they're friendly and they mean it well, but sometimes it forms a bit of a pattern. So in terms of, I split it into categories because actually they do kind of fall into these patterns of what people will say. So first is character, because it's so obvious the way a child is behaving. So this is a big one. You're so shy. I heard that so many times when I was younger, and I always thought to myself, I'm not really, but if you say it too often, a child starts to think they are, and then it's a bit of a perpetuating cycle. So whatever shy translates as in your local language, careful to use it, because I don't think it's a bad word, but for highly sensitives, they take on board what you're saying really quickly. So think about that one. And she often seems to play alone. My child does too, and she has done since she was a baby. I had to actually step back and just go stop interfering because I was playing with her, which was so fun. But actually, she got real value from fiddling with Duplo, looking after her doll, making Sylvanian families have lunch and play in the garden and she needed to be on her own to think through these things. And I think it's maybe because if there's too much social interaction, you have to concentrate on that and you're still receiving all the other stuff. So if you can kind of refine what's being received, that helps a highly sensitive child's focus. And they have great focus, but they will get frustrated and angry if the focus is on too many things at once. Again, I think this applies to a lot of children, right? So it's not just highly sensitives, but these are things that happen in the classroom because there's so much stimuli all the time. You know, it's okay sometimes for them to play alone in the playground because that may be the only time when they let off steam. And as professionals and experts, you know when that's a bad thing. The child will show you that they're feeling sad. They'll tell their parents, you know. So if that is not happening, consider they might be highly sensitive and that they need it. Yeah, she likes to observe before joining in. We hinted at that before. There's a degree of caution involved with being highly sensitive, which is actually good. If our politicians were a little more cautious, perhaps we wouldn't be in quite such a mess. You notice so much? Yeah, they kind of do, especially the extrovert ones, actually, because my daughter is an extrovert. She will tell me everything she notices about literally everything. Like if we're in the garden, she'll notice the light on the leaves and what the sounds are and which bird is that. And kind of, we only have a city yard, it's nothing special, but she's interested in it. And you kind of have to pick what you're going to talk about. Either you get a highly sensitive extrovert child can also be a bit of an energy draw. So you have to be careful of that as a teacher, I think, as well, whilst also encouraging them. And why are you taking so long? This is a big one with my daughter. And me, transitions are hard for them in the same way they might be for a very autistic child or somebody who's got ADHD. You need to prepare them in advance. So it helps. Once they've got the structure of the day, say you're in a primary school, if there's a very clear structure, you don't need it as much because they'll just be like, well, this is what we always do, it's fine. But if you're getting them ready for school and they're just getting used to it, consider adding 20 minutes to 30 minutes to your routine. It means getting up a bit earlier, but it makes a huge difference to the smoothness of the day. And you don't have to do it forever because once they're used to it, they'll go really fast. But yeah, they don't like being rushed. That can also result in quite anger and quite a lot of frustration or sadness. And yeah, we still struggle with that now, by the way. And my daughter's nearly 9. We had a problem today with it. Yeah, and ability, she's well ahead of her peers. Now, this is a thing we have to be careful with because I kind of feel like giftedness, we need to be careful about that word. But they have highly sensitive children might not be the best academically. They might not be the best with sports or art. It's not really about that. It's more that because they receive a lot and notice a lot, when they are learning to finally focus and express what they're noticing, quite a lot of very gentle magic happens and you can't really test it. They are often quite creative and artistic, also brilliant at sports or even academic things, but I don't think that tells you that child is highly sensitive. I think it's more if you're a lunchtime supervisor and there's a child who always comes to you and says, I think there's trouble brewing there, or it sounds like they're like the classroom gossip, but actually what they're doing is telling you that they're interested in that behavior. So they don't necessarily want you to take action, but they just really want to know what's going on there. You know, why are my friends feeling this way? And they want to get to the bottom of something, and they're quite forensic about it sometimes. And they can be fascinating to talk to, but yeah, again, be careful how much attention you give them, otherwise the other kids might be thinking what's going on. But that's the kind of, they're socially ahead often, socially and emotionally advanced in a way that you might not see in every other child. Even the most academically gifted ones might not have that aspect. And they love art and dance. Well, mine does anyway, but that might be, bear in mind, a lot of these might be a bit specific to my child because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just gleaning this from research, talking to a lot of different people. and my own experience. And other children go to him or her for support and answers. Often it's because they're quite nice kids. They're the nice ones in class. They're very careful to be nasty because they feel the hurt inside them if they say a nasty thing, they'll feel quite guilty and ashamed of it immediately. I kind of know this from my own childhood too, that I couldn't ever join in with any bullying or nasty words, even if I thought, there was a child in my class who had trouble with his nose. He always had a runny nose and everyone teased him for it. It was horrible. And, it was quite bad. And I wasn't the brave one who stepped in to stop it in the playground, but I also couldn't ever say, oh, David, look at you. You're just got, all the horrible things other kids were saying. If there's a child who consistently isn't nasty, then that doesn't necessarily make them high sensitive. Of course it doesn't. It makes them a nice child, but I think they're more likely to be kinder from a younger age, even when it's difficult to be kind, actually. My daughter is always asking me about behaviours at school, and when somebody's unkind to her, we have to do quite a lot of work on what her mindset is doing. So having a really good positive growth mindset, but also being accepting of negative emotions is super good. If you can cultivate that as a teacher, they will notice, high sensitives will notice, oh, that person's always naughty, but you know what, my teacher manages them and she accepts them as they are. They will notice that, and then they'll start to apply it to themselves, which is very cool. Social skills. So other friends might say, oh, why don't you just join in, and the child may join in, or they may say, I don't really want to, or actually I will, but just for a minute, or kind of. It's also, parents will say it sometimes in playgrounds, or even parents of the highly sensitive child sometimes when they haven't realised, they might say it, and it can do a bit of damage, that, because if you're small and you hear someone say, why can't you just do exactly the same as that child or this child or your sister or brother, you start to feel a little bit judged, and then that can lead to feelings of shame about who you are. So these small set questions that we all ask often can be more powerful than you think. And we've covered the next one, I think. Behavior, likewise, this is where we're getting into things that parents might say, actually, and definitely mine said to me. I had to be really, I've even said it to my own daughter, nobody's perfect, but things like this, if they're heard from a parent or a teacher, can be, make them feel quite bad. So why is she so sensitive to criticism? If a teacher says that to a parent of a highly sensitive and the child is there on a parent-teacher meeting, they'll just think, oh my goodness, they don't like me. Or she had too much empathy for others and not enough for her himself. And that's actually a very empathetic thing to say. I've heard that too. I wonder whether there is such a thing as too much empathy, but it is possible when it comes to only looking after other people and not themselves. So the highly sensitive child, it's good to kind of observe closely how they do their friends, because it would be a bad idea to pair them up with someone who is very forceful. Good leaders can be a great pairing with an HSC, but if you're doing something like group work, or you're thinking about seating plans for the following year, or putting certain friends together, or recommending them for secondary level or something, it's probably a good idea to kind of think, maybe not that person who never listens to other children, or maybe not that person who always has to be leader, or maybe not that person who can't take turns yet, even though they're 11. That kind of person is going to be a bit toxic for a highly sensitive child, whereas another child might deal with it better. So how you pair children also comes into this, and I'm a big believer in definitely mixing up the children and making sure they have exposure to lots of different types of people. It's brilliant, but I think highly sensitive children need a little bit more sensitivity around that from the people who are organising it for them. And this one I heard loads. She cries too much for her or his age. Now, what age do you stop crying a lot? I mean, that really upset me when I heard it, actually, because I thought crying has to be a good thing. It's an expression of an emotion. it can mean that you've been hurt, but you need to do it. It's there for a very good biological reason, you know. So I think that doesn't relate to age to begin with. And also they may be crying because they're not able to tell you what's wrong, because they are sensitive to something, but they can't necessarily put it into words or share it with you because they don't actually trust you enough to tell you. So careful of anyone who says that. And reacting strongly, it's similar. So yes, they do react strongly, but all children react strongly. The younger they are, the more they react. And actually with highly sensitives, it's more a response than a reaction. And it always tells you something about something being wrong. For a very long time, our daughter was coming home crying and having tummy aches and all sorts of psychosomatic things. And it worried us. That was before we sort of worked this out. But when I read about high sensitivity, I thought, okay, that makes sense. So every time this is happening, it's not something about at home, because we thought it was. Something is occurring at school. So we would just gently say, Maisie, if you want to tell us something about your day, you don't have to, but you can tell us at any time in the week about something. And eventually she just sort of would say things when she felt like she needed to, and we just listened. We didn't try to fix it. And now she still does that, and it's helped immensely. And I wonder, again, probably that would help all kids. So a lot of things that help highly sensitive kids helps all of them, I think. And the last one is communication. So she prefers listening to speaking. Yeah, quite a lot of the time we do. Even the most extrovert of HSCs might prefer that, because actually, if you think about it, I'd be interested to see if you agree as teachers, actually. But I've always thought a lot of learning happens when you listen. Not that teaching should be didactic, but like active listening, you know, where you absorb some information and let it filter. And it can take an hour, days, weeks for a child to have a response to something you've said. Doesn't mean they're the thickest in the class. It means that they're giving it real thought. So a child who comes to you and says, hey, I had this idea, and you think, oh God, that was in my planning 3 weeks ago. You know, you kind of feel like you've done it. Well, bear with them if they've got time, because they've probably had quite an interesting insight about something you were talking about in class. And I like that you can chat with me about everything without judging me. Now, other children have said that about my child. I've heard them say it within earshot, not necessarily using those words, but basically they're saying, thanks for being my friend, you understand me. I don't know if this is Maisie in particular, but I think it is partly her trait that she will give everyone the benefit of the doubt, which I think is great, but can also be dangerous. It's a sort of innocence, but it's more to do with the fact that they know how it feels to feel slighted, shamed, smaller, being told that they are something that they aren't because people have just judged without actually getting to know them. They kind of identify with it. So any child who's struggling in class, I mean, don't be careful because they'll have their friends, but if there is a newcomer, say there's a newcomer from a new country or somebody who has some sort of difficulty or difference about them that will be obvious at the beginning, if you put that child on the table with a highly sensitive child, I can't say for sure, but my prediction would be that they'll be okay because that little child will kind of, without even thinking about it, be helpful. They may not be the most open or talkative with them, but they'll notice stuff about them and try and include them. And then the intuitive thing is definitely a thing. People always go, yeah, like me and my daughter we do have the same thoughts at the same time, which is, this sounds really kind of woo-woo, but it isn't. It's actually because there's something about highly sensitives that where the mirror neurons are like a bit more activated, apparently. So that's what gives us empathy, but it also allows you to kind of know what someone is feeling before they talk. You can read parts of their body language and how they look at everything and how they're responding to their environment. You don't necessarily think you're doing this, but there's something computing quite fast with it. Everybody can do it, but HSCs are like, honestly, they're like light year, especially children. They're quite amazing. And I feel like I know a few other kids now, apart from my kid, who might be, but I don't want to diagnose them because I'm not like, I'm not an expert, but you do see a difference with that. and it can be helpful, but it also needs to be managed because they're not like mediums or anything like that. But yeah, I think we underplay that a bit as well, because it can be very useful. It can be great when it comes to making decisions. If a child is struggling with a particular type of learning, say they're super good at language, but they struggle with maths, a simple example. It might not be that maths will always be hard. It might just be that you need to inject more of what they're really good at into the thing they're not so good at. Or maybe sit them next to a child who loves maths, and that will rub off with the social stuff so that they can enjoy the academic side more. You have to get a bit creative about strategy with HSCs. So sorry, that was really long, but this is a really long list which I will not go through, but these are some of the things that come out in those comments. So I can always pass my slides to Pooja if you'd like at the end, but these are the sorts of things we've noticed about Maisie. But some of the things, let me just think as a teacher, some of them are really obvious, but yeah, classroom environment is important for all kids, right? And maybe some of the things you could think about employing for HSCs would also help introverted kids or children who sadly are having trauma at home or somewhere else, or children who use up a lot of their energy really quickly, autistic children, or just kids who come in tired in the morning. You know, these sorts of things will help all of them. Things like, I know a lot of schools now don't have paper books anymore, but if you do have them, instead of having it all separate in a library, consider making a small corner of your classroom, even for older children up to the age of 12 or 13, I would say, cozy, put loads of like blankets and cushions in it, like tactile things. You don't even necessarily need to fence it off. Just make it welcoming and cozy with books to hand or whatever you choose to use. It could also be art supplies or something really simple where they can just go for 5 minutes to just decompress, or maybe with the silencing headphones that you could wear, maybe audio books, something that they can take turns and use, and maybe they can even ask, you know, it should be fair. It should be that all children are able to use it, but a space where they can go, which isn't just a toilet cubicle or a bit of the playground where they hide. Even the playground could be used for this, actually. A section of it can be more sensory. You could just plant a few plants and make one seat with a cushion. It seems like nothing, but to HSCs, it's kind of vital. They need a bit of decompression during the day. Otherwise, by the end of the day, they might be struggling quite a lot. Yeah, so you're right. When you wrote in your introduction, Pooja, you were talking about highly sensitive children's response to things like the pandemic, learning from home, being home a lot, which can be lovely for some children and a nightmare for others. And then having world events like big wars and conflicts happening and learning about them at school, knowing that the adults around them are always maybe slightly tense as well because of that. The HSC will pick up on that, even if you are being super professional and you've left it all at home and you know that you're doing a good job, they'll still kind of wonder. And they'll worry about you if they love you as their teacher, and they often do. Believe me, I love pretty much every single one of my teachers when I was younger, and it's because I really trusted them and they were so inspiring. And when you love your teacher, it's a bit like they're an extra parent when you're in HSC, and you just don't want them to feel sad. So you might find they come up to you and try and cheer you up. The little ones, they might kind of offer you something. The older ones will say, "Are you okay?" And I'll actually ask you. I don't know how you solve that one, but I think the best thing is just to be responsive with one another and maybe use it as an opportunity to have a class discussion. I know certain educational environments are more conducive to that than others, I know. But if it can't be done at school, maybe there's a way to do it as an after-school forum. People can opt in or out. You could bring parents or not. Have it as a space where you just discuss how you're feeling. Not for fixing, just get it out. HSCs and HSPs love that kind of thing. We're not afraid of it. So find out if some of your parents would like to do it too. And it's just an idea, but that might just help take the pressure off if it's getting a bit stressful. And having a kind of connection between parents and teachers like that, it's great for highly sensitive children too. because the triangle of kind of child, teacher, parent is quite important to them, I think. They want to know that everyone's communicating well and getting on well. And actually, as a highly sensitive parent, I really appreciate that too. We don't need to know everything. The child needs to go to school and have their own place where they can just do what they like, and we don't know everything. But at the same time, knowing that your teacher and parent get along is a really nice thing. And that they communicate not just about problems when they come up, but successes too, that we celebrate together. And my daughter particularly loves it. This is a real antidote to any stress that she might be feeling when they're sharing things about things they love at school. So like their spark, when it's morning time before the lessons begin and they share something from their weekend. Often people will bring in things, children will bring in things they love. So the ones who are nature bods, they'll come in and bring leaves and nests they found and conkers, and and talk about how much they love the pattern of the leaf, and they only have a few minutes to do it. But she absolutely loves it because she feels like she's getting to know all the other children by what really turns them on, and every single child has a different interest in that way. And she sees that the teacher encourages it too. And she always wonders what the teacher is interested in, but she's very careful not to bring herself into the classroom. But I think she kind of is itching to know what's my teacher's favourite thing too. What does she do at the weekend? Oh yeah, and this one. Okay, so there are some bad. So let's go into the things that are actually make them possibly a bit tricky in class. So back to the introvert extrovert thing. Introverted HSCs might never say anything in class, and they'll be producing all sorts of things, and you'll need to kind of gently not let them sink into I'm not going to do it, but kind of gently push them, scaffold how much effort they have to make towards some sort of being brave, because they're not brave, but they sometimes just need someone they trust to go whoop, one more step on the ladder towards it. They might need a bit more pushing than other children, gentle pushing. Extrovert HSCs might never shut up. They'll be really, really sweet, and they will think about things, but once they're excited by something, they might be really chatty, and that needs to be kept under control too. But don't think that they're not highly sensitive because of that. They might be more so than lots of other children. And my child in particular is a bit of a rule-based person, and I met a few other kids at school now who are too. It's good to know the rules at school, right? I mean, you want everyone to know them, but this is the child who might go around the playground and start policing everyone. The balls aren't supposed to be over there. You've got to tidy that up. We've got 5 minutes till the bell. There'll be that person, and it's kind of cute for a while, but the other children might find that a bit tricky. So they can make themselves into a bit of a public enemy number one if that's not tempered slightly. And with their own work, the perfectionist tendencies can be quite destructive, I think, for all children, but particularly for HSC. So a school environment where the main thing is to attain results, pretty much to the exclusion of everything else, is very toxic for an HSC. Personally, I believe it's bad for all kids, but that's just my opinion. So the HSC, the reason for that is they're already perfectionists. They already have a little voice in the head telling them that's not good enough, do it again, do it again, do it again. They will rub things out 10 times to make it look perfect. They will sometimes, unfortunately, tell other children that it's not perfect too, and that's not great. So that's where you have to bring the empathy back in and start with them and say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect, Everything's a mistake until it's not. The practice is where the learning is. And with the right people around them, particularly adults, that goes away quite fast. But it can come back if they change teachers or change schools or are feeling insecure about something. But I think that's pretty much, that's a very common, because I have it too. I struggle with it. I pour all my perfectionism into my editing work where it's beneficial. But if I wasn't doing that, I would be a nightmare for my family. Pick this up, make that tidy. Terrible. So that's a difficult thing. But on the flip side, and I see this in the Montessori setting sometimes, Dalton, and also I can't remember there are lots of systems where the child has ownership of their own planning as well as their learning. Maisie likes it that she has her own planner. She has to make sure she accomplishes certain tasks, and then she can select others, but she has to kind of get a breadth of what she's choosing. They'll be fine with it. They'll be fine straight away. You won't even need to explain it to them very much. They'll just be like, yep, this is good, off we go. Very independent. And they might prefer rather big teams working with just one other child. And I don't know whether this should be done all the time, but I definitely think when they're a bit stressed out, it's a good thing to do when they're older. But maybe the best thing is to accept that that's the case when they're small. Because Maisie didn't have it from her first teacher when she was small. It was always big group work, and she never said a thing. And they kept telling me she couldn't do stuff that she'd been doing at home for 2 years. And I was like, yeah, I think maybe the group is the problem, not the people in it, but simply the number of people with things to say, and then the noisy environment in the background too. And the moment she changed schools, the teamwork's not a problem now, because they do it in a quiet environment, and you can concentrate on what your team is saying, and they make them bigger and bigger and bigger each year so that you can practice it a bit. They have loads of questions. They'll be like Sherlock Holmes. They're like, yeah, question after question after question. It doesn't even necessarily need to be something they're that interested in. They just really want to get the depth rather than they're not surface skaters at all. And other children may find that a bit tricky as well. Sometimes some other kids just would like to be on the surface a bit, and that's totally okay. But a person who asks you lots of questions a lot, and even a parent as well, if they're always with the questions and they're actually being quite annoying, it's possible there. So try and be understanding and just say, okay, but let's just focus on one at a time, because we need to be managed too. As parents, how are we doing for time? I'm taking a bit too long. Oh yeah, and this is the thing, right? They may also be really good at school and at home. I don't know why that is, but thinking of myself, it's probably because you don't want to hurt anyone else. You've got like you really don't want to hurt anybody, and also you kind of are very scared of feeling shame. Again, I'm sure that relates to most children, most people, but for highly sensitive children, that shame thing can be activated so fast. And but then there's a responsibility that comes with always being good, always being perfect, always being the one everyone expects to be calm, the one who everyone expects to be tidy. You know, if you do it so long that you realize you've put yourself in that position and it's hard to get out of it. So it's okay sometimes if that highly sensitive child does something a bit naughty, obviously give them the discipline that everyone else receives, but afterwards have a word with them saying, oh, what do you think that was about? And kind of excavate a little bit, because they'll probably have some ideas. And then it won't happen again, but they'll also, you can make them feel like making that little mistake was okay. It's human. You know, or not putting everything away is okay. It's human. You don't have to be good all the time. You can be a rebel sometimes. And then also quite a lot of the time we found with Maisie that on paper, she's okay now, but on paper it can look like they're struggling because exams for highly sensitive children are horrible. Some kids like them. I know they like the competition, they like the pressure, they like the idea that you've got the information and you apply it. They may still enjoy the process, but in their body, they'll feel so much stress that they'll always underperform, I think, always. I remember very clearly that feeling myself. I did okay, but if all of my marks had been 80% exams and 20 coursework, I don't think I'd be where I am now. I don't think I would have gone to university. The coursework was what showed what I could really do, because HSCs show who they are over time. They're not going to be, they can think on their feet, fine. They can be lawyers, doctors, but they aren't necessarily going to be able to be that person who's like, okay, how many states in America? I know straight away. They'll be like, yeah, I know, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to write it down. Or, hold on, I think I know, but I'm not sure. They sometimes doubt. But if they're allowed to do a piece of coursework, they know they can go away. They can sort it methodically into sections. They can work tortoise style over time on this piece of work, get real pleasure from the journey of learning, and produce something they're proud of at the end of it, which will probably get fine, grades that are fine. So I think be careful how much, I know you can't always control this, right? Teachers cannot control this. Is like government down. But if you ever have a chance to advocate for highly sensitive children or any children, I think having more of the coursework back in than the exam weightage is good. Because actually, when we work in the working world, hardly anything we do needs to be instant retrieval, unless you're, even when you're a leader, I don't think it does. A lot of what we do is working in depth on something and producing a product and making sure that's good quality. You wouldn't get nearly so stressed out over preparing a PowerPoint if you knew that you could just think about it over time, get a deep understanding, and not really have to read it, you know, or kind of, yeah. So yeah, and being outdoors and doing things creative, great for all kids, right? But HSCs get stress relief from it. So if you're finding that it's difficult with them, plan in something where they can do that more. A class walk, or maybe just sitting under a tree to read a book or something as a class. I won't do the visualization because we don't have time, but I've got this whole slide on how to help them, which I realize I've not really gone into, but maybe if you want to, Pooja, we could open it up for questions, because I really believe it's nice to ask people, but it's your choice. What do you think?
I think we'll go ahead with this, and probably if you are able to finish this in another 10 minutes, we'll have time to talk. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, yeah, because this is the last meaty one. So yeah, again, I've split it into categories because these, I think, are the things that I'm thinking about, mainly primary school age children. But if you are teaching older kids, I'd be really fascinated to know how you could apply these things, or whether you have extra ideas, because it was mainly a brainstorm I did sitting next to Maisie and asking her what she finds nice at school. So these are the things that will help an HSC be who they truly are. Whether they're quiet or not, they will present as they are, really, if you encourage these aspects at school and at home as a parent. So encouragement. All kids want encouragement, all people do. But as we've just discussed, a kind of more of a tortoise approach than a hare is always good, even with the extroverted HSCs. So step-by-step approach to challenges and tasks. Take it easy. If it's a 4-year-old little child who's just started school, they're still having trouble with the toilet, talk to their parents about it and get the background, and then make it not a big deal if there's an accident. You know, I think most of the time teachers do this, but in some environments, I know that there's a real emphasis on your child must be able to do this. Well, okay, most parents can manage that, but the odd child can't. And I think it's not necessarily an HSC, but it's very shaming when that child is made to feel like it's really a problem. It's best to kind of just go, right, okay, today we just try and get through the day. By next week, let's try to make sure you've got pants ready, little things like that. And get the parents enlisted if it's someone really young, because it's really their remit. But, you know, that's just one example. If it's more like a child is saying, oh, I really can't do the writing, I can't write this letter, I'm never going to be able to do it, you know, the mindset stuff, just say, okay, let's just do part of it, or do a different letter, choose one, let's work on that one you're comfortable doing, show me that one, and then we'll see how many you can do, and we'll start on one you find difficult. You can pick which one. Not necessarily in your planning, I know, but they get the idea that they can take ownership over it a bit, and that might encourage them to try more hard tasks. And balance the pushing with protecting. So again, the best example of this is for really young children, but also in the playground. So if they're kind of quite hesitant about climbing the climbing frame, instead of being the parent gets their 18-month kid and kind of walks them up the climbing frame, and some kids really love it, right? They're like, yeah, this is great, but an HSC will be kind of crying the whole time and it's obvious they don't want to do it. So instead of doing that, just kind of let them touch the climbing frame, let them cuddle it, let them kind of smack it and see what sound it makes, or once they know it is an object, they'll start to explore. But you've got to kind of put them next to it, because they may never go themselves, that's all. If that makes sense. Yeah, and that's why speaking class will be better if they're feeling relaxed and prepared for it. So if you're gonna ask the whole class to say something, maybe the day before or a couple of days before, just say, we're going to do this. I would love it if you could contribute, everybody. Here's what we're going to talk about. Go home and think about it. If you have ideas, share. If you don't want to talk, it's okay, because you can maybe have a box where you put thoughts, and later the teacher could talk about it for you, or kind of you empower their ideas, but you're kind of their voice for it. Sometimes it needs to start there. And because of transitions and getting ready, if you don't want a lot of upset and angry children getting on the bus to go on the theatre trip, you might want to give them a lot of information about it beforehand. But again, I think that's harder with younger children probably, because the more they're at school and understanding your lovely routines, the less that happens. So from encouragement, you can do empowerment, which is a big word for all of us in all sorts of areas now. But it's different to encouragement in that this is about allowing that person to be highly sensitive, because they're never not going to be, and see the good aspects of that in themselves and be able to use those in a way that they love. So if the highly sensitive child is the one that loves rules, make them the person in charge of enforcing them in the class. They'll do a really good job and they'll love doing it. And the children won't see them as a pariah because they'll know that's their job in class. Of course, you need to share that role, but if they're constantly asking to do something, try to let them, because that enthusiasm won't necessarily always be there. They'll give up on it quite quickly if it's always tamped down. What else? Things like if they are brave enough to speak in class one day because this thing really excites them, then definitely kind of quietly later say, top, because they'll love that someone's recognized it, or just tell their parents and say, this is lovely what they did today. Or, if it's a bit out of character, big it up a bit. And when if you're a parent, if your child goes to another child's house for the first time, or maybe there's a bit of a problem with that child, but they still want to play, just share with the other parent, you don't have to do things differently, but we have to do this at home because, and just give one reason. And don't say because she's highly sensitive. I just kind of say, she might not always tell you if she needs a bathroom. She might not always tell you if your child has said something. She might shout, but just ask her. Just don't be afraid to ask her. Parents know their child really well, so it's best that you're the person that advocates for them. Also at school. But I think teachers often can be the person that spots that someone is highly sensitive. So if you have an inkling, it's not something that needs to be diagnosed. It doesn't have to go through psychologists or anything like that, because it's a trait that isn't problematic in a way others are. So if you wonder, you can just say, have you thought about looking at this website? Elaine Aron also has a website. Maybe just explore it and see what you think. And we can maybe come up with things that we can do and help in that way. Nurture their curiosity, let them ask lots of questions, and group work is great for this because they may not be the one who wants to be in charge, but my God, will they have questions. And in asking those questions, the other kids usually come up with brilliant ideas. So it's got two benefits. One, they get to let their curiosity run wild and the other children get to kind of play with the questions and answer them and also add more of what they're thinking. So it kind of ekes out that creativity for everyone. It's really great. And ask them loads of questions too. They'll love it. They will love it. I mean, not one after the other, but we used to do Grey of the Day, I think, in Maisie's class. Grey of the Day. It's a Swedish concept. And you just have a question on Friday that you can go home and think about over the weekend. Anything like, why is toilet roll paper white? Or why do insects have 6 legs? Things like that. And you can go and research it, or you could just think about it. And they come back and talk about it on Monday. It was rather nice. Make sure you're up to date on high sensitivity too. I mean, you don't have to read every book, but just being aware of it is really good. And thoughts about it are changing all the time, because I don't know whether it's part of the neurodivergent dialogue, but I think it should be, because it's definitely one that gets mixed up with other things, and I think some people can think they're one thing when they're actually this. And it's very easy to manage it. We've talked about relaxation. That's quite easy to introduce that into school and your classroom, I think. And teachers are like the most creative people on the planet, apart from artists. So I think you will probably, between you and your children, be able to come up with something really cool about that. Or maybe if you think a child is highly sensitive and their parents don't know, suggest it to them. Say, have you thought about talking about a cozy cave, or, you know, making a space where they can just retreat. And please, please, please don't leave music, art, drama, dance, any outdoor nature-based activities off your curriculum if possible, because they're crucial to us. Like, we start to die a bit inside if we're always doing language and maths, no matter how much we love them. We need something expressive, not necessarily to be loud or the person with the spotlight on us, but to be able to get out the stuff we're receiving. And it's great for all the kids. So, and they love looking at other people's artwork. They find it fascinating. You know, my child is always talking about, oh, you know, Yenna does this beautiful stuff with inks, and Martin can do these amazing poems. Like, she, you know, they love sharing it. And it's wonderful when children are noticing other people's strengths rather than worrying about measuring themselves against each other. They can articulate why someone else is good at something. Now, I think if that could be brought into our world of work, politics, everything, we might just have a little bit less competition and conflict, and more everyone doing things they really love, and also able to help other people do that rather than seeing that as a threat. You see it as an advantage. So I'm not saying HSCs have the they don't necessarily hold all the cards for this, but they definitely can help that culture grow in your classroom.